Thank you, Chairman. We now move down on the agenda for number three, item three, public comment. The floor is now open for public comment. If anyone in the gallery would like to make a comment this morning, please keep your comments relevant to any of the proposed legislation listed on today's agenda. Thank you. Um, I Short recess. Sorry. From recess. So we're still in public comments. If there are none, let the record reflect that no public comment was made. Public comment is now closed. If there are no objections, I would like to move to resolve or can I get a motion to resolve the committee as a whole?
So move.
Thank you. A motion was made to resolve the committee as a whole and was seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All in favor say nay. Motion carries. We now move into committee as a whole. We would like to invite the Secretary of Labor, Ms. Leila Staffler, and her team to join us in the chamber, please. Thank you. We now move down to item 4 on the agenda under old business. Um, Under old business, we have House Bill number 23-48, introduced by Representative Danita Yangtimai to amend Title 4, Division 9 of the Commonwealth Code to place the apprenticeship program within the Department of Labor and to repeal 3 CMC subsection 1351 through subsection 1358 in their entirety and for other purposes. This bill was passed in the House of Representative on July 28, and we would now turn over the floor to Secretary of Labor. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair, and thank you to the Senate Committee for allowing us to come and give you some updates on the CNMI apprenticeship program as it stands and where we hope to take it in the next years. Just a brief history of apprenticeship in the Marianas. We did this presentation recently, or my colleagues and I worked together, and they worked with the partners at NMC to create a presentation on where we stand as an apprenticeship in the Marianas. Today, here with me, I have our program manager for the WIA. My program director for WIA is Frances Torres. She's all the way on my far right. And then right in between us is our apprenticeship manager, Mr. Joe Villacrucis, and he will be giving us all of the great information that you'll want to know about where we are today with who our apprenticeships are with and how many we have. But I will give you a little bit of history. So in 1983, for Public Law 3-66, there was a first mention establishing an apprenticeship training program for resident workers. That was 40 years ago. In that time, there were identified areas of importance for building up the workforce industry in the Marianas. And number one then was construction maintenance, and installation. Interestingly enough, today in 2023, that is still the number one need for workforce development. That is based on a lot of our data. And so the history, starting all the way back 40 years ago, shows that construction apprenticeships are something that the Marianas has been in need of and has been a focus since then. In 2006, there was Public Law 1505, which amended Public Law 0306 and mandated NMC establish an apprenticeship program to focus on business, tourism, industrial, technical, and professional programs. Here, moving on in 2019 up to 2023, the CNMI Department of Labor was granted an apprenticeship state expansion grant. This grant's purpose was to promote the U.S. Department of Labor registered apprenticeship programs, aka RAP, as a significant workforce solution. This program was designed to upskill incumbent workers in demand driven occupations in the CNMI. Unfortunately, that program hit the pandemic. It started right around the pandemic, and so there wasn't a lot of action in the beginning parts. But since we have, been opening up and reestablishing our economy, our registered apprenticeships have shot up in this 1 year that we've been working on it, and so that will be part of the update that you'll get from Joe. In 2020 to 2024, NMC was awarded another state expansion grant, which was to provide technical support and assist with structure building in collaboration with the Department of Labor. By 2020, it was really seen that the NMC's original establishment in Public Law 3-66 was not really funded by anybody, and so it was something that stalled. Then with this grant and with Department of Labor taking over, there was a program established that follows the U.S. Department of Labor program. So it wasn't like it had to be built from scratch. It is something that was already existing, whereas at NMC, it would have had to probably be built from scratch. So that's where we are today as far as who's running the program and how it first came about. Today, we are here to talk about House Bill 23-48, and this is to reestablish a CNMI registered apprenticeship program, but within the Department of Labor. And it would be designated to increase locally high skilled workers and establish systems for employers to hire and train apprentices and authorize tax credits for certain long term apprenticeship training experiences. And so, with all of that, we definitely want to be able to answer your questions about how this works. But for now, I will pass the mic down to our WIA program director and our apprenticeship program manager to add anything else I might have missed. Kai, would you like to go first? Or Joe? All right, we're letting Joe take over. Here we go.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having us here. My name is Joe Villacruzes. I'm the program manager for the Workforce Investment Agency. So just a little correction. I was the program manager for the apprenticeship program, but since the end of that grant in June of 2023, moved on to become the program manager for all the other programs within the WIA division. So I just want to talk a little bit about how the registered apprenticeship program works. There are several core components in running this program. The very first one is its employer-driven program, which means an employer does a lot of the, or not does, but they develop the program. So unlike other programs out there, it's really catered to the needs of that organization. So it's very employer driven. The second one is it's a very structured on-the-job learning with a mentorship, which means the apprentice goes to work, does everything that he or she needs to do based on the work process schedule, which I'll talk about later, with a mentor. So a mentor needs to be identified within the workplace to provide the supervision of this work process schedule. And the mentor needs to be at least either certified or equivalent in knowledge to that particular occupation. The next one is related training instruction. So these apprentices must complete a certain amount of courses, 144 hours a year in related training instruction. So these courses may be provided to them by our eligible training providers, whether that be NMC, NMTech, Island Training Solutions, Ladi Training Academy, Guam Marianas Training Center, um, any online providers that specifically caters to that particular occupation in terms of meeting those courses. The next one is rewards for skills gain. There is a requirement of a wage progression throughout the course. Typically, there's a starting wage and an end wage, depending on the length of the program. So if it's let's say 3 years, we typically recommend that there's at least three wage progressions within that program. And the next one is nationally recognized credentials. So at the end, once an apprentice successfully completes the program, they will receive a credential from the U.S. Department of Labor certifying them in that particular occupation. Lastly, employer commitment. I don't have the exact data, but there are studies out there that a lot of the apprentices, because the apprenticeship program has been running for a long time in throughout the U.S., more so in foreign countries like UK and Australia, who has been doing it even longer than the US. Um, Typically, a lot of the apprentices become loyal employees of the company, which reduces the turnover ratio. So a quick process of how a registered apprenticeship works. We typically connect with the employers. If they don't come to us, we go out to them. We do a lot of business engagements, either one-on-one or as a group in organizations such as Saipan Chamber of Commerce, SHRM, Rotary Club of Saipan, and other organizations out there. When we do um, sit down with the employer, we try to identify what their needs are. We don't just jump into what we feel that they would need. They let us know what they would need, and then we try to match them with the other different programs that we have under the Workforce Investment Agency or the WIOA Title I programs. We have been practicing a career pathway for a lot of the our job seekers, as well as the employers, where a potential candidate can start off in one program leading up to a registered apprenticeship program as the end goal. Um, we identify their needs through Occupation Finder. The application process is pretty standard with our WIOA Title I programs. The sponsor and an apprentice would need to fill out an application. Then a work process schedule is developed. We do a great job with working with the potential sponsors in creating this work process schedule, because it could be a little bit tedious in how to develop it, and a lot of employers are not aware of how the registered apprenticeship program works. So we're with them every step of the way. And then from there, we send all that information up to the U.S. Department of Labor's Office of Apprenticeship, where they provide us the certificate of registration, the standards builder, and Appendix A and B. Appendix A and B pretty much is a document that outlines the requirements of that program, from wage schedule, the courses, and the hours, and everything else that is required to complete the program. And then from there, when an apprentice completes the program, like I mentioned, they gain a national credential from the U.S. Department of Labor. And in some cases, and I'll talk about this a little bit with the other or the current sponsors. Some of them might get double certification. So, for example, with Priority Care, they're in a registered apprenticeship program. They're using it to also prepare them to take their licensing exam. So when they complete their licensing exam, they will get their license through I, the national registration for EMTs, and then as well as get a credential from U.S. Department of Labor. So that's one great benefit for the apprentice. So on this handout, if you on the backside of it, there is our current wrap sponsors. As you can see, we have a total of 8 sponsors with a total of 34 apprentices. When we started the program, we started out with Pacific Biomedical Services with 2 biomedical technicians in 2021, and the next one didn't happen until 2022. Which was Southern Barber. Then it kind of goes down in chronological order in on this list. So as you can see, there's forward movement, there's progression in the registered apprenticeship program, and we're hoping to increase it even more, especially with the upcoming. Um, I mean, with the current touchback issues and also the phase out of CW1 permits. Uh, Further, any pending questions? That completes my presentation.
Thank you.
Recognize.
Recognize Senator Abata.
Susan Swasey, Vice Chair. Before we lose our train of thought with what in line with what you're saying, I'd like to ask questions as you are giving us the data. You mentioned that you partnered with biomedical services in 2021. How many technicians were you able to enroll in this program in 2021?
So the initial registration were for 2 apprentices, um, and they're both for biomedical technicians. I also want to note that Pacific Biomedical Services, they have a company in Guam too, and they've been running a registered apprenticeship program. So Mr. Beneventi from Pacific Biomedical Services, um, he's very accommodating of our program, so he's aware of how the apprenticeship program works. And but yeah, since then it's only been 2 with them, and then moving forward, as you can see on the list, we've created more
Of the
opportunities.
2, are they still in the program?
Yes. So currently the program is for 4 years.
Yes.
So for a biomedical technician, it's a little bit more complex, so it requires a 4-year program.
Okay, how does this bill to create an apprenticeship program under the Department of Labor, CNMI Department of Labor, not conflict with NMTech? They're also an apprenticeship program of sorts. Why not merge or reorganize it and move NMTech to Department of Labor if you guys are handling, to produce skilled workers, which is what we need in our workforce. So help me understand that part.
Thank you, Senator Babalta, Francis Torres, Director of WIA. So just to clarify the difference, NM Tech is a training provider. And so, and how it's language and apprenticeship is they're an intermediary of a registered apprenticeship system. The bill houses the program at DOL because right, moves it over to DOL because under our WIOA Title I programs, registered apprenticeship is one of the recognized workforce strategies in terms of our work-based training. And so NMTech is not the operator of the program, so to speak. They're the RTI component or related training instructor providers. So they provide the coursework, but they are also in the process. They can have a program to build their workforce at NMT. They can. We're actually in the process, right, of working
Wouldn't
with
that be
them.
duplicating your efforts with this bill?
No.
Think about it more of Department of Labor processes the papers and connects the people, the training providers and the apprentices together. We are who connects them with the Department of Labor. We are who is the
Conduit.
conduit for
sorts.
all of this stuff. NMTI could not do it without us
Sure.
because
understand
they
that.
don't have the, I guess, processes and staff to do the monitoring and do all of the applications with the Department of Labor, the communications for at least the approval of the processes. We go through NMTI as one of the training providers so that if a person is interested in a construction or HVAC or whatever that is, we go through them. Now, we would be also the conduit to connect with the employer. We all have to work together. It has to be a very aligned system. So by proving this bill, it would put the system in a correct alignment, because right now it's housed at NMC, but it doesn't have any funding source and it doesn't have a system to actually apply the apprenticeship processes, which is what Joe just described to you.
Would it be appropriate then for the legislature to migrate NMTech into Department of Labor?
Absolutely not. Because
Why?
they are a training provider and we do not provide the training. We just
Okay,
we outsource training
sure.
based on what the business or the individual who is interested in being trained wants. And if they want to go to NMTI, then we direct them to NMTI. If they want to go to NMC, or what's the other options? There's a few different
Yeah,
options.
yeah.
There's several different training providers. Those are just the two biggest ones.
Would this increase the operations of the government in terms of funding? I know WIA gets federal funding completely, and
We would
lot
be
of-
able to apply for additional federal grants. Yes, right now our goal, we have 34 apprentices. We cannot. The minimum to apply for the next federal grant is 100, and so that's where we're aiming. But
100.
apprentices,
Okay.
yes. Well, we want to negotiate with them because there's some thoughts that we want to give to how many training providers versus how many apprentices, but that's another conversation.
One last question for Mr. Villacruz. As you mentioned that in June of this year, the grant expired or you lost it due to non-compliance or whatever reason.
It was the end of the performance period. So as a matter of fact, that was just an extension. So it was scheduled to end in June 2022. We had requested for a no-cost extension, so it ended in 2023. of
Did you
June.
reapply? Is there a provision that you can reapply for that same grant?
Go ahead.
It's a discretionary grant, so it had
see.
an expiration date, and they have not announced new grant opportunities, but we're always keeping an eye out, because our goal is to continue to provide funding sources to support registered apprenticeship here in the CNMI. But even without an apprenticeship-specific grant, we utilize existing WIOA resources, federal resources, as well as CW funds to pay for registered apprenticeship programs.
Recognize Senator Mendiola.
Thank you, Chair or Vice Chair. So in line of Senator Bauta's question, so if I may understand this correctly, the intent here is to make labor kind of like the stop shop for apprenticeship. Then you guys funnel them through the appropriate, whether it be educational, whether it be on the job training, whatever it may be, right? So that's kind of the intent of this one. Correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and then so NMC, I understand that NMC had this program, and really the challenge has been funding. My question is, shifting it from NMC to labor, will that alleviate funding issues?
Well, I guess it would alleviate the pressure of NMC to create a system that from scratch, because it exists already within our programs. So duplicating that would definitely save them the pressure. They have not ever expanded it further. The grant that they currently have is focused on marketing and helping us with the development of it. And also because they are a training provider, it wouldn't be appropriate that they house something that they also receive benefits from. And so us being that third party gives more transparency in making sure that things are across the board.
So thank you. Another one is so I'm looking at 34 apprentices, right? Of that, how are they being compensated, or is there any compensation? I'm just trying to understand that process.
Very good question.
Thank you, Senator, for your question. So basically, in a registered apprenticeship program, it's an earn while you learn. And so the individual or the apprentice in this case is employed with the company. And just kind of tying the discussion around, it is employer driven. So that's why the separation between NMC and MTech, because they provide the educational component to this program. The employer decides what type of skills they would like for that specific occupation. But this individual is earning an income. The employer is building the skills of this individual, and then as a participant of a registered apprenticeship program, the business is also getting reimbursements for on-the-job learning, which is what we call the OJL reimbursement. So they get up to currently they get up to 50%.
Okay. So, and in line with, so I'm looking at program challenges, right? One of them is just stakeholder alignment, right? And that's, I guess, if I may understand that correctly, it's really in terms of what the stakeholder needs, right, versus what you guys can provide, correct?
I want to say yes to both, but it's also part of the outreach and education, because the stakeholder alignment we do need more stakeholders at the table. Like construction, for example, since 1983, it's been identified as a need. But if you look at our current RAP sponsors, we don't have as much buy-in yet from the construction companies. That is going to be our next focus for the next several years, in partnership with NMC and the marketing that we do. We need to look at how we can expand our workforce, especially in that area.
Thank you. That pretty much just answered what I was trying to tie this into, because we're looking at a lot of this CW issues that's coming up, right? And I think our biggest or our primary skill that we're going to be lacking of is really, construction. And I'm looking at part of the issue is really just aligning the stakeholders and the apprenticeship program, correct? So thank you, Chair. I yield for now.
Thank you, Senator Mendola. I do have some follow-up questions. So, Joe, you talked about the process. You explained the process a little bit on the registered apprentice program. If I understand you correctly, the Department of Labor gives the certification after the program is completed, correct?
That is correct, but U.S. Department of Labor,
Oh, U.S.
not
Department of Labor
CNMI
provides
Department.
the certification that
At-
nationally
yes.
is okay. How is that certification different from what NMTI gives after they complete the program? What are the two key differences?
So from my understanding, a lot of the certifications from NMTech is very specific to like the different levels. They don't necessarily encompass like so let's say, for example, I go to NMTech and I wanted to get a certification in welding. So there's different levels of welding. Well, in an apprenticeship program, that certification is, I want to say, a step higher into those certification that NMTech provides, even though because the courses may not be the same, or the the work process schedule that we provide is something that was vetted by the U.S. Department of Labor, nationally recognized.
Got it. But if I'm understanding the process correctly, um, you guys are the ones that refer them to NMTI or NMC to take the courses or the training before you certify them, right? So I'm trying to understand, how is it higher? How is the certification higher than what NMTI provides when they're taking the courses in those institutions?
Think of it like, in order to get the national recognition, you have to get ABC.
Sure.
You get ABC for NM Tech. So you get A. If you only get A, then you only have A. But if you have ABC, then you get the national. And you
Got it.
cannot get the national without having gone through the
Completed.
process of the application and all of that. And is there anything else?
I just wanted to add, so NMTech would be very specific to the occupation. There are some cases where our apprentices need to have to go through different or multiple training providers, because let's say, for example, Pacific Biomedical Services, right? They
Okay.
need some courses in certain courses in math, certain courses in English, so they would need to go through NMC for that. Then when they need to do their electrical component or their courses, they would need to go to NMTech, and oftentimes not one institution can provide all of the courses that are required of that occupation.
Great. Thank you for that clarification. Now, moving on to following up in line with Senator Babalta's question regarding the additional cost. Do we have an estimate as to how much the additional cost would be if if this legislation is passed and the program is transferred from NMC to labor? Does labor have an estimate of how much it will cost to operate this program?
Well, I guess I don't have that number exactly, but I would say that if you look at the people who are being used in the from WIA to apply the program operations, that would be the cost that is actually saved from NMC, because they don't have their. We are already spending on that to implement the program and other parts of the WIA workforce initiatives, and so it wouldn't really be an additional cost. The where the cost comes in is when we are dealing with the employer incentives, or what they get out of it, the return on investment, because we already take care of the programmatic side with the operations. So I wouldn't say there's an additional cost at this point. Moving into some of the challenges that you mentioned, future funding sources beyond 2029, especially with the CW possibly being sunsetted, then we would have to look at what future costs could be, because it's a program cost that really is where we need funding. Now, in other places, those kinds of costs are covered by like contractor licensing fees that are dedicated percentages to an apprenticeship. That's something that I have proposed to the House side to at least consider looking at revenue generating bills that could help fund apprenticeships beyond 2029. We're good until 2029. We can get us rolling, but beyond 2029, we do as a community need to think about how do we invest in our workforce. If it's truly important to us, then we find a way. I'm not asking to change any funding source that exists, but to look at current funding or look at future funding sources, such as HB visa fees. In Guam, they receive about $1,200 per HB visa. In the CNMI currently, we have less than 130 HB visas. If the House side would consider doing a revenue generating bill to implement additional fees that could go towards apprenticeships in after 2029, or once HB visas are a thing, then those are different areas that I would recommend that could help with the funding in the future beyond 2029. We will also be pursuing federal grants, but as far as the operational costs, that's something that we are currently okay with for now, so it wouldn't add any additional burden.
Okay, thank you for that, Secretary. I just going back. So right now, are we tracking costs? The costs that are being covered now through federal funds are is labor tracking those costs? And so we should have an idea of how much we've saved, right? The other companies are or uh, for providing those for covering those costs.
Yes, we just don't have it in front of us, but we can definitely provide it to
Okay,
the committee.
great. And then you talked about Guam collecting 1,200 per visa. Is that like a legislative mandate? in Guam?
Yes, there's a law that was written in their Guam legislature that does require additional fees for
Do you
processing.
know if the CNMI currently?
We do not.
Okay.
But I have reached out to the Guam Department of Labor director to have a conversation about other parts of that, because they do have the foreign labor certification approval on their side, which I know that we also would like. And so trying to talk to him about how Guam got that, and to see how we can hopefully migrate into those kinds of systems. I have no final answers or details,
Okay.
but I know that's someplace that we'd like to
Would-
go.
Okay, great. Thank you. And then also we talked about the earning while the apprentices are earning while their income while they're learning, right? Is that being paid for by the employer themselves, or is that funded by
The employer is paying for their wages. They are an incumbent worker, and the employer is getting the
oh,
reimbursements.
got
The
it. So
yeah.
they're an incumbent. What happens if like a new apprentice applicant, right? Like,
It is available. The program is open to also new
okay,
employees. So if they potentially identified a new applicant, then we work together, but they still are their employee.
okay, I see. It's just because you guys are kind of like the matchmakers, right? So they
Right.
come to you, you find an employer that
Yeah.
that needs those employees, and so therefore they would have to hire that employee in order to avail of the reimbursement. Is that
Yes.
okay?
Overall, employment is the ultimate goal for all of the
Yes,
programs that
yes.
we administer at WIA.
Okay, great. Thank you. I recognize Senator Mendiola.
Thank you. So, Director Torres, I think I worked with you a lot on some of the programs, especially during the academy. And I guess my question is that considered a apprenticeship program too? What we did with the fire service, where we created, we went to you for assistance while we pushed the trainees for academy, and then when upon graduation, one of the agreements that we had with, for example, fire, is that we have to hire these people on board permanently.
So
Would that be
to
considered?
that particular program we ran, we called that our customized training, because to make it a registered apprenticeship, you had to employ them from the
From the
beginning.
get-go?
Yes.
Okay. So, and and the truth is, not too many people understand that program.
Right.
No? So I think at one point we pushed like 30
Yeah.
trainees, and it was probably the most at one given time. It was a challenge because we met the agency's need, but at the same time we had to look for that funding source.
Right.
Going back to the program, the apprenticeship program, with well, I guess one of the incentive is that while these guys are going through the training process with the employer, the benefit that they get is that they get a reimbursement of 50%, right, of the
Correct.
cost. Correct. So that would be a benefit to the employer, because pushing them, getting them trained, getting them certified, at the end they get a subject matter expert that they need, that they've trained themselves, while at the same time kind of getting a breakthrough, the DOL giving them some funds, right? So anyways, I just wanted to highlight that. Thank you.
If you look at it, Senator, it's a win-win for all involved. The apprentices is employed, the employer is training its existing worker, to upskill them to a higher level, and meet the skills needs of their business, specific to their business, and we're closing the skills gap here in the CNMI in terms of workforce skills. So
Absolutely. But I think the challenge here, and this probably your priority at this point already, is the skilled workers that we're going to be lacking by 2029 when we start pushing a lot of these skilled workers out. But just to add to that is that, sure, it's a win-win, but here's my question: is that, what if the employer chooses not to employ after the apprenticeship program? Is there any regulation that manages that?
So I think there's a little bit of confusion. So the apprenticeship program again is an incumbent worker. So let's say, for example, in here right now, I don't have the credentials to become Secretary of Labor, right? The secretary wants to put me in an apprenticeship program. So may, in that 1 year, let's say the program's for 1 year, she's my mentor, right? I'm an employee. Uh, and when I complete the program, I'm still an employee, but now I have the credentials to become the next Secretary of Labor. So the apprenticeship program is really a program that creates a pipeline of skilled workers, and it doesn't matter what occupation that is, it's building your workforce capacity.
So it's not necessarily to take that position, but to train you for that
Yes,
position.
yes.
Okay,
But
understood.
and with the hopes that yes, you're
Ascend to that.
you're gonna go, that's your goal, right, is to become that, or to be in that position or in that occupation, after receiving the credentials. Because see what's happening right now here. I mean, just to be honest, in the cinema, almost every company, people get hired. They may not have the credentials to be upskilled or to move up, right? And these individuals may have barriers. They don't want to go to college. They don't have the means. So through a registered apprenticeship program, almost at no cost to the employer and to the apprentice, to go through this program, again, she mentioned it's a win-win situation, right, for both the employer and the apprentice. So I just wanted to make that clear. You have to be an incumbent worker, so you cannot. I think the better question is that I've been faced with is the employers asking me, what's the guarantee that I get to keep this employee after they get the certification?
But wouldn't that question be upon the employer? Because in order for you to go through the program, you have to be a part of the employment already, right? So it's really,
I guess if a person, does something that is inappropriate and so they lose their job, then that would be on them. But it wouldn't. The employer already has them employed. Now, if the employee decides to leave, which is what Joe's mentioning, that's something else that is a concern for employers, and that's where it really helps to also train our managers to treat our employees as fairly as possible, because that's oftentimes what I hear more is people don't quit jobs, they quit managers.
absolutely.
And so I think it's a double-edged sword that we have to walk on.
Well, that's why you guys are this bill is putting you guys in charge of this to kind of manage that and hopefully have a relationship where you can, work
Absolutely.
through that. Anyways, thank you. I yield for now.
Thank you, Senator Mendolia. I know that the chair has a few questions of his own, but just real quick. So you mentioned that there's almost no cost to the employer or the apprentice. Um, can you elaborate a little bit on that? Is there a percentage of cost that is incumbent on the apprentice?
So, as we mentioned, the apprentice is a current employer or an
Right.
incumbent worker. So, they're paying that employee
Sure.
as the regular rate. But throughout the program, we provide 50% of the extraordinary cost for that training to the employer. So,
Can you give some examples of those extraordinary costs?
anything that's related to the on-the-job learning. So I mentioned the work process schedule, right? In that work process schedule, there's a set of benchmarks that they need to
Okay.
hit, and there's hours attached to those benchmarks. So in a month, um, the mentor goes through all those benchmarks with the apprentice, and if they complete those benchmarks or the amount of hours, that's the amount of hours that we will be reimbursing to the employer, not to the apprentice.
Okay. So, is there any cost at all for the apprentice?
Almost no cost at all. Even with the related training instruction courses, we provide the financial means for them to complete it.
The
Okay, I know.
cost is their time.
Okay,
That's
because he
the-
keeps saying
yeah.
almost no cost. So
Almost
I'm
no cost.
in my
What they have
mind.
to give is their time. They have to attend the
Sure.
courses. They have to meet the check marks in the training job process
Got it.
plan. But the cost of actual money, I don't believe that
No financial cost to them.
to the
Okay.
apprentice.
I guess that's where I was trying to clarify
Yeah.
because you mentioned it twice already. So I think with that, Chair, you have the floor.
Thank you, guys. Morning, Secretary, Mr. Villacrucis, and Ms. Torres. Before I begin, can you guys hear me well? Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So going back to Senator Magosnia's line of questions in regards to the cost to the employer. Now you're saying that there's almost no cost to the employer, but then there's this, I guess what you call an incentive of getting a 50% tax deduction. Is this different from the 50% reimbursement to the employer that Mr. Villacrucis was talking about?
Great question. Yes, because we did not discuss that at all. There are two incentives that the employer can choose from. they may choose the 50% tax. The way it's written is that they can choose the tax credit that you are describing. Sorry, I don't recall the language off the top of my head. Or they can choose to take the uh, reimbursements through our Department of Labor program. So they don't get to have both, but they can choose which one might be better for their business.
Okay, so they can, well, then wouldn't that kind of defeat the purpose of giving a tax deduction when this would only be a tax deduction for costs incurred part of implementing this apprenticeship program versus getting a flat out reimbursement from your program for the hours worked by the apprentice? Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. I guess we modeled it after the Guam apprenticeship bill, and that was one of the pieces of language in there. And we were discussing what's the difference. We believe that it would be I guess it depends on the size of the business. If you're a corporation, you might be able to afford and aim for that 50% tax write-off versus using the Department of Labor program. So if you're a smaller business, then you definitely want to take advantage of the Department of Labor program because it definitely will save you a lot more than maybe a larger business. So it just allows businesses options to see what works best for their bottom line. But either way, it would help build workforce within the Marianas.
Okay, thank you. Now I wasn't able to. I've made several attempts to reach out to Director Alvarez at Revenue Tax, but this bill essentially, if it gets signed into law, you'll only have a 90-day period to work this out with Tax and Rev. Have there been any discussions between Labor and Tax and Rev in regards to how this reimbursement will be applied?
We have had some meetings, but we definitely would want to. We would need to hash out more. So if you'd like to add a couple more days onto that, it would be fine with us. 120 days would be maybe more preferable to give us enough time. But we have started those discussions.
Okay, thank you. Do we currently have a CNMI State Workforce Development Board? Um,
Yes, we do.
is it a complete board?
Yes, it is.
Do you know who they consist of?
Yes, so the board is represented by majority business representatives, chaired by IT&E director, I believe she is right now, or holding a different title, Ms. Velma Palacios. And then we have Ms. Denise Montenegro from the hospitality industry. We have Stan Beneventi under workforce programs for the registered apprenticeship. We have Ms. Nicole Balta from Docomo. Dr. Vicente Aldon from the healthcare, Dina Tenorio for marine construction. On the government side of the house, we have Senate President Edith de Longuerero as the Senate representative. House rep is Rep. Ogle. Governor's designee is our Secretary of Labor. And then the core programs, which is myself for Title I, WIOA, Title II, Ms. Lorraine Maui, and Title III, OVR. Title IV OVR is James Rafin. And then we do have, I forgot, our Rota rep. How could I forget? Ms. Jackie Manglonia representing the retail industry.
We do
Okay,
need
thank you.
Tanya
I was just
Walker.
making sure that we have a full, complete board because the board will be in charge of
The
creating
approvals.
this council, yeah?
Yes. Yes, and our existing board is well aware, and they have already started looking at various examples with other states and territories on the specific council for registered apprenticeship. So we're standing ready to move forward at the board level.
Okay, thank you. And then my last question is, there's, you've been mentioning almost no cost to the program, but then I see that one of the proposal was to allow the apprenticeship program to avail of ETC. So if we were to include the apprenticeship program as part of this ETC program, what would those funds be used for?
What we will use the funding for under the ETC is, of course, for staffing and paying for the programs, the reimbursements. But we do leverage that with all of our existing federal dollars, and to sustain and promote, other businesses to participate in a registered apprenticeship.
Okay. And while you say earlier, I think Secretary Stafford mentioned that some of you guys will already be taking care of the program. Do you anticipate needing additional bodies to assist in the review and the, I guess, further implementation of this program?
I guess right now we do not anticipate that need, but as the program grows in the future, I mean, really, we've only had 34 apprentices for this last 2 years or year and a half. We will probably need to expand at some point, but right now we can definitely handle the load. That I hope that answers your question.
But will there be someone to maybe visit these to see if they're, following the guidelines of the apprenticeship program, if they're meeting the requirements, so on and so forth?
Um, our current staffing, we do have the business service part of the house at WIA, and then we do have our career service team, which is focused on the apprentice side of the house. So with the existing staffing we have, yes, they're charged with doing the tracking and working with the employers to build programs and make sure they stay on track of their reimbursements and things like that, their documentation. So we currently do have between our federal programs.
And if I may, one of the beautiful things about WIA is that there are so many different programs that feed into each other. And so an employer might start with a trainee that they eventually hire and then put them into a pre-apprentice that they eventually move into an apprentice. And all of these are different funding sources that feed into each other that are all run in the WIA house. And so the staff that do the different outreach are doing the outreach for all of those programs, because the federal requirements are very, very stringent in the outcomes that they require. Because if we don't meet the outcomes, they take money away. And we definitely don't want that to happen. So all of the processes that are in place are to make sure that we reach those outcomes, because the last thing we want is to lose funding. And so those all support the business outreach that you're describing. It doesn't matter which program they're in. If it's in WIA, we are monitoring and we are following up regularly.
If I can just add to what Francis was mentioning earlier in regards to tracking and monitoring, we do have multiple systems that we use. But the two biggest ones is one, we do have Hire Marianas that kind of tracks a lot of their activities, and also a requirement of U.S. Department of Labor's Office of Apprenticeship is that we enter those hours and their activities as well into a system called Rapids, which is a system provided by the Office of Apprenticeship.
Okay, thank you. And just one last question. I don't know if I missed it, sorry, but if let's just say a company, I don't know how it works, applies for a WIA trainee, can that trainee be part of the WIA program but also be enrolled in the apprenticeship program simultaneously, or?
I'll answer that question, Senator. So yes, an apprentice is enrolled in WIOA. Even the 34 that we have presented here, both the employer and the individual or the apprentice is a participant of our program. So they do get concurrent enrollment or concurrent services between WIOA programs and a registered apprenticeship. So I guess to explain that a little easier, registered apprenticeship program is one of the work-based learning strategies under WIOA. So yes, the individual or the apprentice must be an eligible participant for WIOA Title I and could be leveraged with Title IV.
Isn't WIA paid? aren't WIA trainees paid by the WIA program?
So, well, there's different approaches. There's different, that's what we call our work experience or internship. So our work-based learning strategies could be work experience or internship for those new folks into the workforce. There's registered apprenticeship. So it depends on the type of program. But yes, like Secretary explained earlier, they could start off as a work experience participant, and then move into higher training activities such as a registered apprenticeship, where they now are employed by the employer, and the relationship is with the employer for the reimbursement.
Okay, so clarified. That's all I have. Thank you again, Secretary, for answering my late call to join us today, and thank you for your team for joining us today. At this time, I yield the question.
Thank you, Chair. I recognize Senator Babauta.
Thank you, Vice Chair. There's still confusion, obviously, and we're going to continue to ask these questions about cost and everything. I think while your answers provided are helpful, I still can't get a full grasp of how this reimbursement works. So what I've heard from your team so far is that these are incumbent employees and their salaries are paid for by the company or business that hires them as an apprentice. 100%. Is that correct? So how does the reimbursement work through labor or because Secretary, you mentioned that they could either avail of a reimbursement of type or a 50% tax
The-
credit.
The bill would introduce the tax credit. That does not exist currently. That is not something that businesses can avail of today. After this bill
And
is
that
passed,
is modeled after the Guam,
yes, ma'am.
because I spoke with Guam senators about their apprenticeship program, and apparently it's not working as well. It's a generous program, and from what I heard from the senators, that it hasn't worked as well as they would like. And I can't give you any more information than what they've told me. I don't know why they would say that. Of course, I don't have the data on the apprenticeship program in Guam. So that's something we would consider when debating over the bait as a committee. But also, why would the ETC be included in this bill? I don't understand that portion.
Uh,
It's a part of the definitions.
I believe that it was included as a additional support for the apprenticeship funding source because of the grant being run out, and then also looking at beyond 2029 as a possible funding source. I think that was why it was included.
Okay, so um,
So it would be a way for businesses to be able to put money towards an apprenticeship program if they believe in it.
so
But
you're asking the legislature to earmark some of the ETC, is that correct?
I don't believe so because you guys don't really earmark that. They pay directly to whatever
a business,
institution.
yes, you're
Yeah.
right.
So we would have to, provide our documentation to wherever it's appropriate. If
That would be difficult, the way I see it, because the apprenticeship program is not necessarily an educational program per se. You're more focused on developing the workforce and skills of the employee, but we can debate that further in committee. Um, what is the dropout rate of this program so far, since it has been?
So since the implementation of this, we have had no dropouts. Like
Okay.
I mentioned, Pacific Biomedical Services has the longest running program, which is 4 years, and with 2 apprentices, they're still in it. And then the other sponsors and apprentices have either started late last year or the beginning of this year. So, and a lot of them are 1 year programs. So we haven't had any dropouts yet.
Okay.
And knocking on wood, we
Thank you
won't.
for that. Very good statistics, better than NMC's. I can tell you that. So recently, I attended NMTech's graduation, if you would, a certification. How does that play now? The ones who were certified as, culinary who receive their culinary certifications primarily in construction. How does that play into the program now, the apprenticeship? How is the pipeline created through the CNMI Department of Labor? Because I have repeatedly asked NM Tech officials, why aren't we seeing their graduates transition into the workforce the way we need them to? So if you can help me understand that.
Okay, let me try to put it in this perspective. So let's say, for example, we have a restaurant and um, Skyway Cafe, for example, and so I've employed a maintenance worker for over 5 years. And, that maintenance, I see the maintenance worker has built interest in culinary arts. And so I hear about registered apprenticeship. I contact DOL, I get my program approved. And so I start putting that person into the registered apprenticeship. But I, Skyway Cafe, the employer, have chosen the specific coursework that I feel is necessary for my chef at Skyway to be successful as a cook. Now, the difference between NMTech's program is they have their curriculum already built, where they have to take all these specific courses, whereas as the registered apprenticeship, the employer just selects specific ones. So they may say, oh, I don't need baking and pastry as part of my work process for a registered apprenticeship. So that's kind of where the difference is. It's I like to say, or call it an upskill backfill approach in terms of training, where employers can upskill people that have been with them for years into higher positions, and then opening up those lower end positions for new opportunities for our new entrants to the workforce.
If I can continue on
Sure.
that, the difference with what you're seeing right now with graduates that are just graduating is that they are not with an apprenticeship program yet.
Yeah.
And the whole point is to get us aligned so that we can be, I guess, doing more of the, uh, what's the right word? Referrals for job placement.
Okay.
That's part of the discussions we have with NMC and NM Tech all the time. We even have discussions with PSS because we need to start this pipeline sooner, middle school at the very least. And so we are having these conversations behind the scenes that you don't actually see. And that's where we're building up. And everybody in the educational institutions is supporting this apprenticeship program because they see that even they want to connect to the businesses, but they need that additional support. And that's the whole purpose of the Department of Labor, to be that intermediary to connect our businesses with our educational institutions so that we can feed each other the students and the workforce that we all need. Right now, the culture of the workforce is something that Marianas has been changing since we got taken over from our immigration. It is something that people still conflate with each other. And so we are still trying to rebrand ourselves as labor alone that is there to help build those bridges. And that's kind of been what we've been working on. And so that would address what you're asking. We can't solve it today, but we've been having the conversations to solve it for hopefully tomorrow.
Do you see any progress?
Heck yeah.
Okay.
I absolutely do.
Because I'm still baffled. We're all baffled trying to solve this puzzle and put the pieces together. NM Tech, NMC, labor,
The next meeting that we
PSS, so
have,
it's
I will make sure to invite
difficult. Sure, thank you. One of the other questions that I had was, this bill proposes to repeal in its entirety 3 CMC sections 1351 to 1358. One of the provisions there, specifically section 1354, which let me pull it up. It has something to do with communicating with PSS. It will be repealed, and it's not in the new bill that I see. So how would you like us to include that back in, maybe? I don't think it's necessary. I think you guys can, as leaders of your own department, can easily promulgate either regulations or MOUs, MOAs. We don't need a statute to actually do that,
I
to
support
tell
that.
people what to do.
We absolutely don't need that because it is definitely a collaborative environment as a whole. We have to work together.
Just for your information, Section 1354 deals with collaboration with the PSS Technical Education Program, and I don't know that they still do have one. It says the NMC shall collaborate with the PSS so that students of the PSS Technical Education Program established under Public Law 14-54, codified as 3 CMC Section 1901, its sequence, can progress towards certification on the U.S. Registered Apprenticeship Program. So this will be repealed, and it's not in the new bill. We
I
may need to add it in.
I don't mind if you add it in. I mean, I leave that discretion to you. We, with or without it, we would plan to collaborate with PSS. But if it forces them to collaborate with us, then yes, put it in.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you,
I
Maura.
yield.
Senator, if I could just add to that. The specific bill is registered apprenticeship. So what we have going on with PSS is the pre-apprenticeship opportunities where students can start receiving the foundational skills while in school, and where our partnership and with the WIOA programs is to allow them a summer internship to apply those skills and subsequently land them the job to lead them into registered apprenticeship. So I guess that can kind of help to clarify that.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Thank you, Senator Babauta. If there are no objections from the members, we have our legal counsel who has questions. Thank you.
We need 100 to apply for the next grant. So that's our minimum goal that we're aiming for. We really are only limited by the amount of businesses who want to work with us. They say that WIA is the best kept secret, and we don't want to be a secret anymore. We want to spread the word high and low. And so part of our big push has been with business outreach. And Joe, maybe you can tell us a little bit about what you've done with that to get to 34. How did you solicit so many people this year?
All right. First, it is very complex. I mean, it's very hard to explain the registered apprenticeship program. It took me a few months to really get into it before I went out into the community. But it really boils down to what the specific needs are of the employer. And what I've done is, provide them the information I provided you today is the same pitch I provide them, the benefits, and it helped a lot when we went to Saipan Chamber of Commerce, or we had all the employers there. We feel like this number could be greater, especially because we don't have the construction industry yet. I think that would be the biggest one. And because registered apprenticeship program is fairly new to the CNMI, there's still a lot of questions, a lot of confusion as to how the program works. So we've been tying loose ends. We mentioned working with PSS through our pre-apprenticeship program. We've worked with NMC and NMTech on how we can develop different initiatives to get them into a registered apprenticeship program. In-house, what we've been doing is a lot of our business community only knows the Workforce Investment Agency as the 100% subsidy trainee, right? So what we've been doing is when these companies come in to become work experience or work-based training sponsors, and they're requesting for trainees, because we require them a letter of guarantee that they're going to employ the trainee at the end of the program. Now we're going in to these same companies and saying, okay, this is the end of the training for this trainee. Now we can provide more services to the trainee, and the company, to get into a registered apprenticeship program so that they can further their skills. And so that's how that's what the strategy has been lately, and it has been proven to that there's progression. Again, I came in February 2022. workforce investment agency with only 2 apprentices, 1 sponsor. Since then, we've gone up from 8 to 8 sponsors with 34 apprentices, and we're still working. As we speak, there's registrations that is ongoing. So we're looking at growing that even more. And just to kind of clarify the grant that our secretary was mentioning, just to give a little bit of background, there was a formula grant that was given out this year. We tried to apply for it, and the U.S. Department of Labor said, "Well, sorry, you guys didn't meet the 100 apprentices that would, fulfill the requirements of this grant." So we're trying to get to that number. We did find out that there's certain territories that were granted, um, but we have more sponsors than them. They have like maybe 1 or 2 sponsors, but because they're larger organizations, they were able to meet the 100 apprentices. But we definitely have more sponsors, even though our apprentices are lower.
If I could add, I think the bill also will kind of help us to push it forward and enroll more, because it will allow us to streamline the approval process, where we know we will now, through the bill, it will allow us to be recognized as a state apprenticeship agency, where we do our own approvals through the board level, as opposed to the current practice where we have to go through U.S. Department of Labor, because we are an OA program.
And if I can just close with that, your first question, just that word of mouth has been the best way that so far it has grown to this number of 34. And, it has been only a year really since we've gotten these guys on board. So our next steps, we plan to do marketing with our actual apprentice to say, this is why I joined it, and have the employer say, look at how much return on investment I got. We do plan to do that because I know that we can definitely get more recruitment if local people see themselves in the videos and see their cousins and see their family and be like, oh, wow, I can do that too. So that's our definite next steps.
So the Sinai Department of Labor was granted a grant called Apprenticeship State Expansion, which is pretty much a grant that runs the program. Now, NMC applied for the State Apprenticeship Expansion. Yeah, they just switched the words around, but it's 2 different grants, and their grant was specifically to help build the infrastructure of the registered apprenticeship program. Even though it's weird that we got the grant first than them, which should have been the other way around, right? But yeah, so they're really in charge of the outreach and marketing and working with uh, um, the business community, and then also with providing technical assistance with the related training instruction. Yes, they have. They have been. Yes.
So once, if the bill passes, then you'll be able to apply for this state, the same grant that they applied for, and I'm still applying.
If it's
Is
available.
that correct?
If it
Right now,
becomes
they're the state agency, right?
If
That-
it is available.
It's a discretionary grant, so their grant will also expire. It's expiring June 30, 2024. So I guess through the bill, it would now centralize all of the registered apprenticeship grant opportunities, so that DOL will be the main applicant.
Do we know if NMC has apprentice in their programs as well?
They don't, because the programs are developed by DOL, or the WIA division, and so we run the programmatic
But they
side.
do offer that program at NMC though, right?
They are
Or no?
a related training provider, so their coursework may
Their coursework.
be
Got it.
used in a registered apprenticeship program.
Okay. I just have a few follow-up questions. So, so you talked about the 2 incentives. Currently, those incentives are not in place. It's in the proposed bill?
The one incentive of the 50% reimbursement
is in place.
ongoing.
Okay.
The bill would allow for a tax credit or tax deductible, whichever the correct language.
Okay.
Forgive me.
And I was curious, is there any analysis done on the tax incentive as to the reduction in BGR?
That is not something that we are capable of
So I
providing.
guess, so in your conversations with revenue and tax, that hasn't come up?
Not the details and the numbers, but we
Okay.
did at least have a discussion about
Okay.
it.
Just a recommendation on your next meetings with them to please just seek their guidance on this, because we also don't want to have an impact on the government's ability to fund all the agencies it has through BGRs, right? So we also want to make sure that we, and is that 50% deduction, tax deduction, is it modeled after Guam, or is that, or who recommended that?
Yeah, it was modeled after Guam.
Okay, so that's definitely something that revenue and tax would, I mean, I would encourage that revenue and tax have a say in what that percentage should be versus the 50%, because we have to take into consideration that Guam's population is a lot bigger than the CNMI, right? Just business wise and then population. So we would definitely seek revenue and taxes advice
No
when with regards
objections.
to the tax percentage. And then I was curious on the grants that you guys get to fund the personnel currently um, a- assisting with the apprentice program. Does that come from the indirect cost?
No, it's a direct program cost.
Oh, okay, so okay, it's built in. Got it. And then I that's all I have. Did you guys have any other presentation that you we didn't get to it because we started asking questions, but did you guys want to resume back to your presentation or?
No, we've covered everything. You gave us enough time to go over the beginning parts in particular.
Okay.
The 2-pager handout there, it just shows you a little more specific details about the current apprenticeships, how many years they've been going, length of hours, etc. And again, we just want to thank you for the time to be able to clarify all of these things. It is a confusing program. Trust me, I had a cheat sheet that I would use often when I first started this discussion, but I want to just commend the leadership of Francis Torres and Joe Torres. I always called you Joe Torres. Sorry, Joe Villacruzes, for their excellent work in reorganizing the apprenticeship into something that is actually working today. And we look for you to assist us with future funding sources to maintain and keep the program going beyond 2029, and also to help encourage businesses to join, help spread the word that we can provide a good return on investment, that the employers can tailor these programs exactly how they want it to work. They just need to give us the time to be able to work with them to understand all the parts. But we really don't want to be the best kept secret. We want everyone to know that WIOA can. Yes, WIOA can.
Yes, and thank you for sharing that information, because now I'm aware of the kind of programs that you guys provide, and I actually have been talking to a lot of small business owners who can definitely avail of the kind of assistance that you guys provide, especially with the funding side of it, right? And to upskill their workers. So thank you for sharing that, and I'm now gonna go and share the word.
Thank you.
Chair, did you have anything else that you would like to ask?
Nothing else to add, but again, thank you to all you three for coming in today at such short notice. Um, and happy holidays to all of you.
Short recess. Thank you. Okay.
We now rise back from recess. Prior to going on recess, we concluded our meeting with the Department of Labor. So at this time, can I get a motion to rise back into committee meeting?
So moved.
Second.
All right, motion was made and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Motion carries. And we're back now to the main discussion on House Bill 2348. I guess at this time, we will be reaching out to NMC as well as provide our council and LA time to work on some language discussions in regards to possible amendments, which members will introduce tomorrow. And so at this time, we will take a recess until 11:30 a.m. tomorrow, December 28th. At this time, we are now in recess.